What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Mind of Marsal podcast. This is episode number 142. I'm your host, Armando Marsal. You can find all of my work over at fantasyguru.com. Follow me on the Twitter machine at Armando_Marsal, as well as on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Mind of Marsal. Before we jump into it, I just want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in. I greatly appreciate you all. Remember, folks, if you're enjoying the content, join this episode, enjoying anything we talk about, please make sure you follow, rate, review, like wherever it is you're consuming it. Well, welcome back to the show as part of our division by division series of recapping the 2025 season and looking ahead at the 2026 season. We're shifting our focus today on the AFC North. As usual, we're going to be breaking down where each team stands, looking at the coaching changes across the division, taking a look at free agency, priorities and team needs and roster needs, all of that good stuff. And as usual, here with me to break it all down is the one and only Tyler Buecher. How's it going, brother?
What's going on, Mondo? Excited to chat this particular division. Did a little lunch break right before hopping on with you, and I was kind of breaking down watching the movies Kill Bill. I saw like a 4 hour extended version where they kind of just group them all together, and that movie just jumps right into the chaos. And I think chaos is like the perfect word for the AFC North, where we just saw so much change and wild stuff happen in this 2025 season that it's fun. It's going to be a fun one to recap and a fun one to jump into in terms of like looking forward to the 2026 season. So excited to do this podcast with you here, man.
Yeah, this is a fun one. Like we talked about yesterday, we broke down the AFC West on episode 141. If you haven't heard it, go check that out. But that was a fun division. But I feel like this one has so many coaching changes. There's going to be so many new identities here across the board. And I think a lot of impactful free agencies or free agents from this division that we could talk about here today. This is one of those divisions where I think didn't pan out as most people thought. Baltimore was one of the favorites, if not the absolute favorite in this division last year. They went 8-9, losing it, the final week for losing the playoffs in the final week, against the Steelers, who won the division. And I don't think anyone had them winning the division. So I do think it was a very surprising season here for this AFC North. Just to recap the records here, Pittsburgh won the division with a 10-7 record. Ravens 8-9 record. The Bengals finished 6-11, and the Browns 5-12. For me, I look, the Steelers defense was a huge, factor in their run this year. And they had a game manager, Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, obviously, there's questions of whether he's going to return or not. We'll talk about all that. But Baltimore Ravens to me was like the biggest letdown. Of course, injuries piled up, and it kind of was one of those trains that derailed early on and was never able to get back on track. And when they had their chances, they just couldn't find a way to take advantage of it. The Bengals, injuries as well, the lack of defense. I think that's been the ongoing story here. Offensive line issues, ongoing story. And then the Browns, I mean, mess once again, Tyler. But overall thoughts here on this division from 2025. Like, what were your thoughts on it, man?
Yeah, I think you had the hot word there, injuries. That kind of just feels like the summary of this whole entire season, especially when you look at the two contenders in Baltimore and Cincinnati. I thought those were the most likely ones to contribute as the eventual division winners. Pittsburgh coming out with the sneaky attack, so good for them. Wildest turn of events though is Mike Tomlin announcing his retirement after that. Not retirement, but stepping away from the Pittsburgh head coach after 19 seasons with them. So even even the victors like saw some wild finishes there. Yeah, I think this entire division is once again up for grabs. Like we see the AFC North is nicknamed one of the more black and blue divisions in terms of like just physical play year in and year out. Some low scoring games, a lot of one score games. Um, I'm just excited to see this once again. I think we're going to see a lot of turnover in terms of some of the personnel, but the overall vibes for these teams, it's been like this way for quite a while. So I'm looking forward to breaking this down with you here.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. I look at this division and I'm like, it's up for grabs. It really is. There are divisions that you say, all right, there's a dominant team. There may be two dominant teams. We talked about that, with the AFC East. And now we're talking about a division where I think outside of Cleveland, you can make a strong case for anyone going into this season, and lots of personnel changes. I think the only team actually without a new head coach in this division is the Bengals. So there's three different head coaching changes here in this division alone, as well as coordinators. and all of that good stuff. We're going to talk about that here. As usual, Tyler, you and I will go, alphabetical order, and we're going to break down the AFC North here. We'll talk about the Baltimore Ravens. You mentioned new head coaches. John Harbaugh is no longer with the Ravens. They hired Jesse Minter here. They also got a new offensive coordinator here. So, I mean, an entirely new look, a system. Just I think it's going to be an entirely new regime here. So, how are you seeing this here for Baltimore, a team that was a run heavy team, that they relied a lot on their tight ends. Do you see any changes in their look in their offense here this upcoming season?
Yeah, it'll be a big change for this team. I was just pulling up the division odds for who's going to win this. The Ravens are the current betting favorites at minus 120. Next closest plus 220 is Cincinnati. Um, Baltimore, though, tough year. So they opened the year with a lot of close games, some one-score losses to Buffalo, a one-score loss to Detroit. Then in that Kansas City game in Week 4, Lamar Jackson hurt his hamstring, I believe, and he really wasn't effective upon return. Pardon me. He was the quarterback six prior to injury and EPA and completion percentage over expectation composite for weeks 9 through 18 upon return, dropped down to quarterback 21. So his poor play, I think it really led to the Ravens' downfall, where when you invest so heavily in like a centerpiece of your offense, to see that piece go down really just kind of impacts the greatness of your entire offense. And then defensively, they lost Justin Madubuike to a career-threatening neck injury, really turned them into a pass funnel defense this year, where they were really poor against the run for the beginning part of the year. Then they got back some pieces and they turned the run defense around, but the pass defense all season long was just kind of a miss. They finished the year 31st in pass yards per game allowed, 30th in sacks. So this defense has a lot of work to do in terms of turning things around. And I think they brought in an interesting coach here in Jesse Minter, who we talked about the AFC West the last week, our last podcast, and Minter comes from the Chargers. I thought what he did there, where he would just kind of made this third unit a better unit as a collective, like a sum of all parts kind of thing, rather than individual pieces flashing. I'm really hopeful that Minter is able to do that here. He'll handle the defensive side, where they brought in offensive coordinator Declan Doyle, who was 29 years old last year. He was the Chicago Bears offensive coordinator, youngest offensive coordinator in NFL history, when he was just 28 years old. He was previously the Broncos tight end coach, worked as the Saints offensive assistant. One note of optimism for Doyle as the play caller here is when you look back at Chicago's offense, he was tasked with their second half adjustments. And we know the Bears were a second half offense where they really kind of came to life over the second half of games. Um, they had 7 comeback victories last season, so I think that's super notable with him calling plays. He also has been quoted with wanting his offenses to quote unquote morph against whatever is best against the opposing defense. So that's great having an offensive coordinator that's being willing to be malleable with his approach in terms of targeting a team's weak pass defense or a weak run defense. He also wants done for explosive pass plays. One other final thing with Doyle, I'd anticipate a shift towards more 11 personnel. The Bears were 23rd in 11 personnel, which isn't a high rate. It was just 52% of their offensive plays. But the Ravens last year, 32nd in this stat. They rarely ran 11 personnel at just 29.9%. So I think those are where we're going to see Doyle's biggest fingerprints on this offense is the week-to-week manipulation of the kind of plays that he'll be calling, the hunts for explosive plays, and the expansion of more 11 personnel.
I think it's just going to be a more exciting offense. Like I just truly see it, and I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. You're right. Like the Bears, that offense took a big leap forward last year, right? Like it was
Hmm.
I mean, that offense clicked on most, like pretty much every cylinder for most of the season. Yeah, they weren't perfect, but they were a team that bounced, but made a good leap forward in 2025. So I'm excited to see what Doyle does here. As far as free agency is concerned, there's some key offensive linemen here that they're going to be, losing here in free agency. So I think that that's going to be a huge priority. We got Linderbaum set to be, a free agent there. You also have several other, offensive linemen here that are going to be free agents. And then as far as key players, role players, I don't really see many role players. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, but at this stage of his career, I don't think he's that impactful. Um, I don't know. Wallace, I don't think that's, the one guy is likely, right? Like that's the one guy here that he's probably going to go elsewhere. I don't see him returning here. Keaton Mitchell is another one but he's a restricted free agent, so I don't see him going anywhere here. But for me, it's mainly the offensive line, and then switch it over on defense. They're going to lose, Draymond Jones, Van Noy here, Gilman, the safety. Like there's several guys here that they're going to be losing that are impactful defense. And given the coach here, I don't know if he's going to prioritize and have to pay for these guys, or if he's going to bring the guys that he thinks is going to work within his system, like what you alluded to, what he did in the Chargers, and work there for him. So I'm very interested to see what they do here, Tyler. What are your thoughts on some of these free agents and maybe, that kind of, who they should be bringing back and whatnot?
Yeah, Linderbaum to me is the biggest one of note because he's just going to. I mean, we've already heard the quote from DaCosta where he'll command a market moving deal in terms of being the highest commodity at center right now. And I think of like around the league how many young quarterbacks there are that would benefit from a talented a veteran center that's able to make those checks and calls at the offensive line and really just kind of help the young quarterback as they like transition to the NFL. Like I think the Raiders with a ton of cap space are going to be bidding for him. Baltimore's got $20 million in cap space right now, 16th in the league right now. So they've got some money to make some moves, but I do think Linderbaum would probably take up a huge chunk of that if they were to try to retain him. Um, you mentioned a few of the free agents that they're going to be losing. I think Patrick Ricard, their fullback, is kind of a quiet one, but a very notable one. Just some fun on-off splits with him. Derrick Henry averaged 5.66 yards per carry with Picard on the field. That was over 140 carries, and then just 4.80 yards per carry without him. So nearly zero point 0.8 yards per carry less on 167 carries. Very notable. It's also very interesting because Doyle and the Bears didn't use the fullback that much in Chicago. So I'm curious to see if he sticks around in Baltimore or if he goes elsewhere. Defensively, like I think bringing back uh, Gilman probably makes a lot of sense. When you looked at the Chargers, their coverage scheme had a lot of too high coverages, but when the Ravens traded for Gilman, they switched to more single high and allowed uh, Kyle Hamilton to play down in the box a lot more where he was at his best. So retaining Gilman or bringing in at least another safety to play that free safety or just to play deep, I think that should be a huge need for the squad. Um, and then yeah, like the defensive line, like you could say edge or DL. I think both are in play. But this team finished 30th in sacks. Trading Ode Offway to the Chargers, I think really came back to bite them where they just didn't really have a lot of players. But yeah, I think those are the big needs to me. Center, safety, defensive line.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like I think their primary focus here is going to be on the defensive side of the football. You mentioned the edge, defensive line, safety, center. You mentioned that. We talked about, the potential loss there for them at the position. It would be a huge loss. I think they could add a tight end here as well, like especially if they don't
Yeah.
retain likely. I think that's a viable option there. And then let's talk about looking ahead here for this team because right now they have, Flowers, Bateman. These are their, primary wideouts here. Like, do you think they could beef up the wide receiver position a little bit?
So when I look at Doyle and what they did with the Bears, it kind of seemed like instead of a singular guy, they kind of spread the ball around a bit in Chicago, where I'm envisioning some of that kind of being cut and pasted here over to Baltimore. Where, I mean, Flowers really isn't like when you close your eyes, he's not a star receiver in many people's eyes, but he is coming off a really good campaign in year three. Career highs in receptions with 86, 1,200 receiving yards, 14.3 fantasy points per game. He was the wide receiver 13. And what I liked about him the most was he was like very good out of the slot. He was very good against man coverage, very good against single high. His yards per out run against all of those defensive looks were just fantastic. This is a guy who is like a slot flanker hybrid, where like he's running about 33% of his routes from the slot. So the shift to more 11 personnel, I think it's really going to actually benefit Flowers the most. The problem is they've got Bateman on the outside and then kind of a question mark with Hopkins on the other side being a slated free agent. Tylan Wallace also out the door. Um, I'm not sure if we've got the current answer there for who will be outside there in three receiver sets. We could be looking at a player added via the draft or a player that's coming in late. The one kid out of what's his name? Out of North Carolina. I'm interested to see if he comes back. He's kind of just been a guy that I've been marinating with. not marinating, just holding on to some of my dynasty leagues. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name right now. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Devontae Walker, sorry. Yeah, he's like a 6'4" field stretcher. We saw a few sporadic spike plays deep down the field. So I think that's really his best role as in the explosive game. Um, just keep in mind when you look at like the stats for all these Ravens players, how poor Lamar Jackson was upon his return from injury. A lot of all their stats are pretty poor aside from Flowers, where the poor play just kind of trickled down to like Bateman, who had a massive regression in terms of 2024 versus 2025. The same for Mark Andrews, regression 2024 versus 2025, where I think a healthy Lamar Jackson, a better passing attack will just kind of elevate everything naturally. Where I don't know if they need to go out and make a big splash play, where again, this could be similar to the defense of Minter, where the offense is just kind of a sum of its parts, where between Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, this offense can run real well.
Yeah, I look, so I look at Zay Flowers and you just look at what he's done, right? 24% target share, 25% target share last year, 29%. Like he's trending in the right direction. Even with Jackson not playing his best football. I feel the most confident about him going into next season, really. Um,
Mm.
I I don't. I'm going to be okay with taking him as. I'm okay with taking him as your wide receiver two, wide receiver three. You're probably going to have to pay a little bit more than you were paying last year, given his, what he did last season. You mentioned it, 1,211 yards. 1,204 of those were air yards. That's crazy. He had 1,204 air yards and 1,211 receiving yards last season. But look, he's been very consistent. I agree with you. Maybe he's not the superstar alpha, but I think he's a very efficient wide receiver, right? And in this offense, especially with what we're expecting the new look to be, I think that's going to work very well here. So I look at him and I think his role is going to be remain consistent. Bateman, it just hasn't happened, right? Like
Yeah.
I've wanted it to happen. I'm a Bateman fan, but it just hasn't happened. And at this point, you have to ask yourself, like, is he going to ever become maybe what some expected him to become? And I just don't know if that's going to happen. He's entering what, year four? No, five. No, I'm sorry, year six. Um, so yeah, man, it just has not worked out for him here. So I could see a scenario where they add a piece, but it's not a priority by any means. Likely if he goes elsewhere, does this mean that Mark Andrews becomes more consistent?
You know, they signed him to a contract where they're hoping so. 3 years, $39 million. They just signed that contract back in December, so it was only a few months ago that they made this deal. I think they're gonna let Isaiah likely test the waters of free agency. I really doubt that they get into a bidding war, given all the cap space that they've got and the need to sign Linderbaum and any other players they really want to bring back. Um, so I think likely is likely to likely to test free agency and sign elsewhere. I think Andrews is kind of on the decline where we saw again just his production just a career low in yards per reception, his second fewest receptions per game since his rookie season. His touchdowns nearly cut in half. I do think some of it's Andrews getting older. I also think it's some of it is Lamar Jackson having the poor second half season. So I think they're both kind of just converged toward a pretty poor 2025 campaign. And it's just funny when you look at like Andrews versus Kelsey, who are going back to back in drafts. Kelsey was the clear answer relative to Andrews.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at his 2024 season, there was some decline as well. Obviously, the touchdown rate was very high for Andrews. I would expect something maybe in the middle between his 2024 season and last year. Because I do think that age has played a key role here in his kind of decline in production without question. But again, they are paying him, and if you look at the how the this offense, I do think he's going to play a key role. We did see the tight ends play a significant role in Chicago last year. Um, Running back, is Derrick Henry going to continue doing what Derrick Henry does?
Let me add one last comment on the tight end. Charlie Kolar,
He's
free
also
agent of
yeah.
note. I really like this guy. He's somebody that I've got on a few dynasty squads that are tight end premium, just because I really liked him as a prospect. He had 89th percentile speed, a 95th percentile catch radius. He came out of Iowa State where he was the focal point of their passing attack. He's just kind of been buried on this depth chart as kind of like an inline tight end, where I think there are a lot of teams that are shifting toward more 12 and 13 personnel where they've got the guys that are able to play detached from the formation, but the guys that are in line and they're good blockers and good pass catchers are kind of sparse, where I think Kolar could yield a pretty decent market in the open market here as another free agent. I'd be very interested to see where he lands as well. So for those looking for a deep dynasty play, go look at Kolar, see if he's out there on waivers. Pivoting to Derrick Henry, man. I mean, King Henry, like this dude's just an anomaly. Like we saw a slight step backwards, but a slight step backwards was still 1,600 rushing yards and 16 rushing touchdowns. I will note his 15 receptions were the fewest he's seen since his 2018 season, but advanced stats wise, like Henry did not fall off at all. He was RB7 in explosive run rate, RB36 in missed tackles, force per attempt. That one was kind of bad, but RB16 in yards after contact per attempt, RB3 in rush yards over expectation per attempt. And then you look at his stats fantasy wise. 16.4 fantasy points per game. He was the RB8. But when you needed him most, he was dropping some absolute hammers in the fantasy playoffs. 22.8 PPR in the semifinals, and then 45.6 points in the finals. Henry Henry took home a lot of trophies for a lot of fantasy players this past year. He's entering his age 33 or age 32 season this year, and this guy just breaks age curves. He does not care. He's a statistical anomaly. He's an outlier. I don't know if I'm super into him outside of the best ball format. I was into him last year as a start sit guy. This year, I'm probably going to dial it back toward more best ball exposure, where I'm hoping to get those, uh, just capture those weeks where he runs for the explosive plays and multiple scores.
Dude, he was top four in runs of 10 plus yards, and he was top three in runs of 15 plus yards. He's still an explosive running back, dude. He is built different. But look, the way he conditions and treats his body, like if you have followed him, like I follow like him and stuff like that, and some of the things it's insane. Like it's insane. It's like Tom Brady when he was in football. It's like LeBron James in basketball. Like these people are like 1,000,000% in on their nutrition, their health, and all that stuff. It's like he is definitely different. He is a different a species, a breed of human, bro. Like it's
Hmm.
insane. Yeah, I look, I didn't pay for him last year. I'll be honest. I was not. I just did not. I'm not doing it again this year, but am I going to be surprised if he goes for over 1,300 rushing yards and 14, 15, 16 rushing touchdowns? No, I won't be surprised. Like I just simply won't. I'll miss that bus if it does happen, but I don't see them bringing much competition here, right? Like you don't see much here as far as anyone coming in here competing or anything like that. I would like to see like a pass catcher out of the backfield for this team, like give them that extra dynamic. They've tried it with Justice Hill. I don't know if that's the answer. Um, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, they've kind of done that quite a bit where Henry, his snaps are more centralized towards first and second downs, with him frequently coming off the field on third downs and on obvious passing situations. Justice Hill, he's provided the spark from time to time, just kind of inconsistent, which I think is how I would summarize most receiving backs. Not every receiving back is going to catch a 10-yard catch every time they're targeted. Um, I don't have any problems with them bringing him back one more year. This is the final year of his contract. He's turning 29 this year, so he'll turn 30 next offseason when he's a free agent. Maybe this is the final year we see Justice Hill in Baltimore.
Yeah. Anything else here with Baltimore?
I'm just curious what they do with Ricard, just given how much that fullback really helped Derrick Henry, where a guy like Derrick Henry's at his best when he's able to get to a full speed, and sometimes that fullback's able to get that last blocker that enables Henry to flip that switch and get going. So I'm curious to see what they do there, but yeah, nothing else here for me.
All right, let's dive into the Cincinnati Bengals, and there aren't many notable changes here as far as the coaching staff is concerned. More so for me here is what's going to happen with Hendrickson, right? Like that's the big question mark here as far as what they do here with this, with their edge. Obviously, a huge piece of the defense. They also have some other players here on defense. Stone, the safety, Taylor Britt, the cornerback. Osei, the edge. Obviously, backup quarterback Joe Flacco. Are they going to bring him back? Noah Fant. I mean, but other than that, it's really what this team is going to do to improve the roster. Like that's the big question here. Defense is an issue. They've been trying very hard to, get a solidified offensive line for Joe Burrow since they drafted him. It's been pretty much a failure each and every season between injuries and just not getting the right pieces and all of that. what are your thoughts here, man? Like as far as this Bengals team, last season, what you thought of, they're obviously they dealt with a lot of injuries. We talked about that at the beginning of the podcast, but your thoughts from them from last season and kind of going into this upcoming year, what are we doing here?
Yeah, similar to the Ravens, we saw their quarterback Joe Flacco. I'm sorry, not Joe Flacco. We saw Joe Burrow take over for half the season, with Flacco taking over a good chunk of other games. Um, Starting with that offensive line, I think they've got a hit there in their third round pick in Fairchild at left guard, Dylan Fairchild. I think he's a decent add for them long term. They brought back their right guard, Dalton Risner, on a 1 year deal. They just signed that this past week. But I do think a guard for Risner down the line, like a replacement, should be high on their list of priorities. Because Risner to me is like a jag. He's just a guy. So getting a replacement for him would be wise. Um, Burrow, it's a tough when you look at like this Bengals offense because they kind of dialed back their passing rate over expectation, which is a stat I commonly reference over instead of pass play percentage because it kind of accounts for game script and what teams are doing in an average situation. So Cincinnati has historically, with Zach Taylor as the coach, just been among the league leaders in pass rate over expectation year in and year out. Like last year, they led the league with a 9.0% mark, very, very high. This past year, that dropped down to 2.1%. And some of it was because of the injuries to their quarterback, some of it was because of gameplay. But despite this team being super pass heavy, they're not a very fast-paced offense. They're one of the rare anomalies that passes heavily but plays slowly. It's a very interesting combination, and usually those two don't go together. So Cincinnati's unique in that regard. But coming off a year where Burrow was quarterback three in fantasy points per game, he had the fewest attempts per game of his career, the fewest passing yards per game of his career. He was quarterback 15 in scoring, 17.4 fantasy points per game, second lowest rate of his career. So, like, all of these numbers kind of just decrease when you account for it on a per game basis. And I think a lot of that has to do with Cincinnati shifting their pass rate over expectation, where they kind of have dialed that back to kind of maybe ease the burden on Burrow and kind of lean more on their run game. Um, yeah, when like the volume was down, but the efficiency was still there for Burrow. If you're trying to look for this from an optimistic lens, his 6.6 passing touchdown rate, quarterback four. He was quarterback five in completion rate over expectation. Unfortunately, it's just without the volume, which is really driving fantasy value in a lot of positions. We saw Burrow just kind of take a step backward. So I'm hoping that he can have a full healthy offseason and have no setbacks and enter 2026 fully healthy. Because I think there's a good chance that should this Bengals team return to their high pass rate, like the not maybe not 9.0%, but something at least on the higher end, that we've got a chance to see Burrow back in the front end list of quarterback ones because I don't see that passing touchdown rate going anywhere. I like usually we see players that eclipse of 5.0% tend to drift backwards towards that median, that league average. But Burrow's just consistently been above it because this is a team that's centered around the pass. So I don't see that being a thing that'll change come 2026.
Yeah, it's just a matter of is he going to attempt 600 plus passes versus 500 and change. Like that's a significant difference for,
Mhm.
for a quarterback. His touchdown rate is still going to remain high, like you said. I agree with that right there. As far as, offensive changes, I don't, obviously we're not going to see any change at quarterback. Obviously, we're not going to see many changes at the receiver position. Chase Brown obviously handled the majority of the workload here. 232 rush attempts. That accounted for 61% of the rush attempts for the Bengals. He also had a very good target share at 14% here, 67% of the snaps. Um, does that change here in 2026? Or is Chase Brown the guy once again here for the Bengals?
So Brown's season, I thought it was actually really simple to review. So in the 8 games that he played with Burrow and when the offense was functional, he averaged 20.1 opportunities per game, 19.4 fantasy points per game. That's tremendous. In all other 9 games, he dropped down to 17.7 opportunities and 14.1 fantasy points per game. So Flacco may have been great for pass volume for some of the guys, but it was Burrow that was leading the touchdown drives. So touchdowns really elevated Chase Brown's fantasy scoring. So let me just break this down. In the 8 games played with Burrow, 9 touchdowns for Chase Brown. And all other games, just 2 touchdowns. That's huge. That's huge. So from a rushing lens, like this Bengals offensive line was surprisingly effective. As a group, they collectively finished top five in both rush success rate and EPA per rush. They did all this despite Chase Brown ranking RB 29 in explosive run rate. He was RB 14 in yards after contact, RB 22 in missed tackles forced. He was kind of middling in yards per out run, RB 23. But again, like I think he was pretty darn good when you look at everything as a whole, RB 7 in total fantasy points per game. And similar to Derrick Henry, this dude was a unit in the postseason. 32.9 PPR points in the semifinals and then 29.1 in the finals. So back-to-back 30 bangers to take it home. This guy was super productive. I just think his best games come with Burrow healthy, and that's not an outlandish thing to say, but it's very just evident when you look at it from a on-off split of when Burrow was on the field with Chase Brown and not.
Back-to-back top 10 seasons for him. Look, he is someone that's going to depend, like you mentioned, on Burrow. But we all hope for a healthy Burrow season every year, right? Like, because that's a fun
Yeah.
offense to watch when he's healthy. So yes, I view him as a top 12 back entering this year again. I think the volume is going to be there. I think upwards of 300 opportunities so long as he stays healthy is in order. Don't see them bringing in anyone that's going to be hugely impactful to his usage here. But I do think that they can always bring a complementary back to this backfield without question. The receiving group, look, it's very simple. It's Jamar Chase, it's T. Higgins. That's it. Yosovas, no, we want Yoshi to pan out. We want him to every now and then in DFS we'll mention his name, maybe. But when Higgins is out, but when everyone's healthy, I think it's pretty obvious that it's the target share is very concentrated with the two receivers, and then third on the list is Chase Brown. So like it's a three-headed monster as far as target share there. So any changes you see here at the receiver, because I feel like this is one of those teams that's pretty straightforward. I think where they really need to focus the primary, when it's free agency, when it's the draft, I think they need to focus on offensive line, the trenches, and defense. Like that's really what it is for me. I don't think the receiver position is good. You could make a case for a tight end. I think Gesicki's fine. The backfield's fine, the quarterback's fine. So for me, it's trenches. But anything on the tight end or wide receiver position here that you want to make a note of?
No, I mean Jamar Chase, top five lock for redraft leagues.
Yeah.
T. Higgins, I mean, so last year the big decision was Higgins versus Trey Hendrickson. Higgins, 4 years, $115 million, ended up posting a 11 touchdown campaign, the highest of his career. So that was with a career high 13.9 8 yard A dot. Wide receiver 14 in fantasy scoring. Like, I mean, we got what we wanted from Chase and Higgins. And I think that, like you said, with the targets being so concentrated around these two, and to a lesser degree, Chase Brown, that there's really not much meat on the bone for a slot receiver or a tight end to really come through as a consistent contributor. So, yeah, I think you nailed it spot on. These are the guys we want to pay attention to. I'm buying both at current cost. And with so much help needed on that defense, this team's going to probably need to be carried by their offense once again, setting up what should be hopefully a voluminous year for the Burrow dropbacks.
Yeah. I mean, I have here my team needs listed are edge, safety, tackle, cornerback, linebacker, and offensive line. Like that's really what I have here, across the board. So I think this is a pretty straightforward team. Do you see them going after any aside from figuring out the Hendricks situation, because that is obviously going to be a priority for this team, going into free agency. But do you see them making a run or pursuing anyone in particular that makes sense for this team? Or do you think it's just going to be one of those where they're taking the best player available based on their team needs here?
Yeah, there's a lot of help that's needed. I will say linebacker, I think, would be an interesting player for them to trade for. Like they've spent some good draft capital on Barrett Carter, Demetrius Knight. Both these guys were so terrible. And we saw once Logan Wilson was traded away over to Dallas midseason that the linebackers were just dreadful. I don't think there's a
Yeah.
better word for it. So I would anticipate a veteran over a rookie pick because I think they need a proven leader there. Not sure what they do with their cap space. They've got $50 million, the seventh most. So they've got the room to either bring in Hendrickson for a long-term deal. I don't know if he does that. He's like 31 years old. He's probably sick of the shenanigans that Cincinnati's been putting him through these past few years. And then they've got the number 10 overall draft pick in this year's class. So I'm eager to see what this group does because they've got the ability, draft pick wise and cap space wise to become heavy hitters in both free agency and the NFL draft.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what they do here, man. I definitely think that this is a team that it has a lot of holes, but they're with a couple good pieces, they could put themselves in a really good spot to compete at a high level. I view, kind of what we talked about when we talked about Josh Allen. So long as you have Josh Allen, you're good. So long as you have Patrick Mahomes, you're good. I feel the same way about Joe Burrow. I think so long as you have Joe Burrow, a healthy Joe Burrow, that is, right? Because that's been an issue for him too. Staying healthy has been an issue for Joe Burrow. But a healthy Joe Burrow is always going to give you a chance. So I'm very eager to see what they do here. I wonder how much, though, if they improve that defense significantly, how much that's going to impact what we talked about earlier, the passing volume, and how much that's going to cap that ceiling there for Joe Burrow. So I think a lot of moving pieces here, moving parts here going to the next season. But I think the offense, for the most part, when you're looking at usage opportunities and roles, I don't think much changes here in 2026. Anything else here before we go and dive into the disaster of the Cleveland Browns here?
Let's hit Cleveland. Let's do it.
Dude, all right. So this is a team. All right. They have a new head coach, Todd Monken. Stefanski was fired. Jim Schwartz decided to resign because he didn't get the head coaching job. So they have obviously new defensive coordinator. They have new offensive coordinator as well there. Travis Switzer. He was the run coordinator for the Ravens from 2023 to 2025. So there's obviously some history there with Monken. And then this is a team that drafted not one, but two quarterbacks after giving one of the most crazy contracts to a quarterback of all of guaranteed money. And going into the season, Tyler, the big question is, what the fuck are they going to do at quarterback? Like, we just don't know. Like, that's not even solved. Your 2025, you know, just recap there of this team, and then going forward, what are we looking at here with this new genre of coaches and this new everything that we got here?
Quarterback was a disaster. The offensive line was a disaster. The run game got started off on the wrong foot because of off-field stuff for Judkins. What else we got here? Wide receiver position can't count on. Tight end was a bright spot. That was great. Was that more reflective of Kevin Stefanski? Now we got one of those stars on the loose with David Njoku being a free agent. There's my 30-second elevator spiel. We've got a lot of disasters coming around. Todd Monken said one of the reasons why he liked this team, why he chose this team as a head coach, is because he wanted to build this offense from the ground up. What does that tell you? That tells me the quarterback position is very unsolved. Building from the ground up means I don't think you even have the QB position solved, and that's kind of evident where they've talked about having an open training camp. They want to have an open competition. I would not be shocked at all if they brought in a fourth guy. And after seeing what we've seen from Monken with the development of Lamar Jackson and bringing home another MVP title in 2024, I wouldn't be shocked if we get one of these mobile QBs that are out there in the free agency market, like an Anthony Richardson or a Trey Lance, to throw his hat in the ring and just create even more chaos for a team here that honestly, I think it should be an open-ended competition. Shador Sanders was dreadful. So there were 37 quarterbacks with 250 plus dropbacks last year. Sanders was dead last in EPA per play, success rate, and second to worst in completion rate over expectation. He scored 15 or less fantasy points in 6 of 7 starts. His 4.7 interception rate was second highest among all quarterbacks. His 9.8% sack rate was fifth highest. He was dead last in catchable throw rate. Too high coverage is right now kind of the coverage meta right now in the NFL. Against too high coverage specifically, he was second worst in completion rate, second worst in passer rating. This offensive line has like a lot to do with the poor play of this offense in its entirety. The offensive line is almost all gone in terms of like expiring contracts. So we're going to see a brand new offensive line. We've got a piss poor performance from the quarterback with the possibility that we got somebody new under center. And then we've got a new offensive coordinator coming in Todd Monken, where there's going to be a lot of just shakeup. I'm just eager to see something different in Cleveland, and I envision fans are seeing and saying the same thing as I am. But there should be some optimism because of what we've seen from Monken like throughout the years. This guy's coached for 35 years throughout his career. That 2018 season, we saw his Tampa Bay Buccaneers lead the league in passing yardage. So like I think that was the 5K season from Winston where he threw 30 and 30, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm just eager to see what we've got here with Monken as they rebuild this. Just know it's not going to be an overnight solution. There's going to be a lot of things that have to come right here for these Browns to turn it around. And I think it really begins with the offensive line.
Well, you mentioned it. Like, Conklin's a free agent. Teller's a free agent. Yeah, Bitonio's a free agent. Ethan Pokich is a free agent. They're two guards. Their left tackle. I'm sorry, their right tackle. and their center all headed to free agent, like free agency, insane. It's going to be a complete overhaul on the offensive line. I agree with you. I think this is a team that you're just going to see a complete rebuild, and including at the quarterback position, despite investing 2 draft picks at the quarterback position last year. Sanders, like you mentioned, I mean, the fact that he made the Pro Bowl, it's pretty funny in my
Comical.
opinion.
Comical.
It's like insane. You mentioned it. Like, I'm just going to feed you off some completion percentages here: 25, 55, 64, 55, 51, 69, 74. All right, fine. Then back to 50. That is awful. All right. That is absolutely awful. You mentioned the numbers as far as he had more multiple interception games and multiple touchdown games. Like, that's insane. Like, like that's pretty comical there as well. I agree. Like, Gabriel's obviously not the answer either. Watson, we don't know what that situation just remains so. I don't know. I have no words.
Yeah.
I
I,
have.
I I have a word, costly. He is taking up 27% of this year's available cap space. He himself, 27%.
But there's not much they can do at this point, right? Like, there's just
Fully
unfortunately that
guaranteed.
this is the hand they dealt themselves, dude. Like, this is the hand they dealt themselves, and they have to play it out at this point, unfortunately. I like the Anthony Richardson call. I do think that'll be fun. It will create a chaotic situation, though. From a fantasy standpoint, it's like, yeah, no,
Yes.
no, because it's not going to be consistent. Like, there's going to be, struggles, and there's going to be changes. And I think that's what I'm expecting here in Cleveland. Like regardless who they bring in. I don't expect whoever starts in week 1 to start all season long. I would be surprised. I would see kind of like a little musical chairs here when someone's struggling, they bring someone else in. I could see a path to that here. Um, Tyler, you mentioned like the wide receiver position, Jerry Judy. Like, he's not. I don't think he's a wide receiver one, man. Like, I think he's better suited for a wide receiver two. Maybe you see it differently here. Um, that's another position of need here. Like, where do you stand with the receiver position here in Cleveland going into the 2026 season?
Yeah, I think outside wide receiver is a big position of need. I think Judy's fine in the slot, like fine. Like he's not a needle mover in any regard. He's getting paid as if he were. He hoodwinked this team into a lot of money this past. I'm sorry, 2 years ago. But I mean, when we look at Judy since joining the Browns, so it's 2 years, 2024, 2025. In the non-Jameis Winston games, Judy is averaging less than 40 receiving yards per game and just 8.4 fantasy points per game. In those splits with Winston, he's nearly doubling his yardage, 79.6, so almost 80 receiving yards and 14.9 fantasy points per game. There were 52 wideouts last year with 70 plus targets, 52. Judy was wide receiver 51 in yards per out run. He was wide receiver 49 in catch rate and wide receiver 49 in fantasy points per game. He still has 3 years on his contract. So, like, releasing him would cost this team over $6 million. And the Browns are already in negative cap space because, again, we've got that guaranteed deal for Watson. So I think trading is on the table, but I kind of doubt it because um, I don't know who would want to pay for that contract and acquire that. But I also doubt Judy's part of this team's long-term vision for the offense. So add in probably him coming off a bad season, like the market for him's got to be lukewarm at best. I think they're stuck with him. They're probably kind of hamstrung themselves where because of this contract, Judy's probably going to stay on this squad for another season, which isn't terrible when you look at how thin the wide receiver group is. It's just kind of not inspiring for change, which is kind of unfortunate. Cedric Tillman, final year of his contract. Isaiah Bond, a UDFA with some field stretching ability. We saw him put up some big games to close out the year. Sorry, let me phrase that. Big plays to close out the year. Um, I wouldn't mind poking around some dynasty rosters to see if Bond is out there. But outside of that, man, it's not exciting. Well, we have to pivot to tight end to get some real eagerness and excitement here.
Yeah, I agree. Howard Fanning Jr., dude, like 22% target share, 107 targets. I thought he obviously a phenomenal season there for him. Really the bright spot. I will say this, Judkins, when healthy, was playing at a very high level too. I'm excited for him as well. Obviously, returning from that gruesome injury, but we'll get to him now at the running back position. But you mentioned it before, David Njoku. So I really, we talked about the offensive line. Off the other gadget or just players, role players here. David Njoku tight end. You got Jerome Ford running back. DeAndre Carter, a wide receiver. Travion Williams, running back. Set to be free agents here. Then you got other guys that I don't think are that impactful, like Corley and Thrash and things like that. But the departure of David Njoku, I think is going to open up tons of opportunities here for Fanning to truly hit his ceiling. And I wouldn't be stunned if this operates where like Kansas City's offense operated at one point, right? Like we've seen with Monken in Baltimore where he's involving his tight ends. I think Fanning is going to have a very good role, a very solidified role here. And he's someone that I think is going to be a priority in fantasy drafts for a lot of people. Talk to me about him, man. He had himself a pretty good season last year, man.
Question for you. Where do you think Harold Fannin is going right now in drafts? You can like say tight end 1 through 12, like or where would you put him?
Tight end 7.
Yeah, tight end 5 right now. He's
Okay.
going early part of round 7 right now. Um, Last year he was tight end 5 in targets and then top 8 in receptions, receiving yards, and fantasy points per game. And that was with spending time with Njoku. That was with some very shaky QB performances. I think you're spot on in terms of the parallels to Travis Kelce, where he could be the center point of this passing attack out of necessity. And what's kind of optimistic for me in terms of Fannin entering 2026 is head coach Todd Monken had Mark Andrews operate as an inline tight end, like close to the formation on just 12.8% of the passing snaps. That was like 52nd of 53 qualifying tight ends. So he was very rarely inline. He was often a detached from the formation, which is what Fannon's role was and where he was best served. So like usually when we get a new coaching staff come in, sometimes we have those worries about a player suddenly being miscast or put in a spot where they won't perform as well. I do not think that's the case with Fannin, where I'm pretty bullish on Fannin. I'm just floored he's tight end 5 right now and players are going after him so aggressively. I'm kind of a little upset with that because I thought Fannin could have been a great buy low, but uh, we're buying high, and it seems like the rest of the fantasy community is as well.
But I'm okay with around 7 though, draft pick, right? Because
I love that.
at that point, I'm good with taking him there because at that point you have I mean, you should have a very strong foundation. You might even have your elite quarterback already. And if you think about it, you have an elite quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, and you got your tight end. You have pretty much your roster. I don't like drafting like that, but I'm saying if you are one of those, I mean, that's a perfect time to target an elite level tight end, in my opinion. Because I mean he was what tight end 6 last year. He was tight end 6 in PPR and tight end 5 in half PPR, if I'm not mistaken. Um, just I mean, and you have to think that he's going to dominate the usage as far as target share is concerned here, for the Browns in 2026.
Mm,
Um, Anything else as far as tight ends here? I think he's their guy. I don't think they're gonna. If they're
yeah,
all, you could always add like a piece here and there, but I don't think they're gonna invest, a ton at the position.
they may get a veteran just to add
Mm.
for some depth, but I think Njoku is an interesting one. I tried to jot down some landing spots. I'm curious what you think of these. Washington, New England, Denver, Tampa Bay if Kate Otten leaves, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. I thought those all were possible, and or they had some reports coming out that those were some interesting teams. Um, I think Njoku's set to make a bag.
Yeah, I think Washington makes a lot of sense because of their offensive dynamics, right? Like they have that young quarterback in Daniels. There's been success with Ertz, but obviously, he's
Coming off
getting out
injury.
there in age, right? Like, you
Yeah.
know. So David Njoku could be a huge help, and they really haven't had a weapon like him at the tight end position. I think Ben Sinnott is not that guy, right? Like I don't think that's panning out as they hoped it would. And Denver, I think Denver is going to make a lot of sense until they sign a tight end. I think they're going to be in play for one until they get one, right? Like I think it's a massive need. We talked about that, on the last podcast, but I agree. I think that's a great landing spot. New England would be interesting. I wonder, like, because they have Henry, like
Hmm.
that would be fun.
But I
That would
believe
be
Henry
fun.
is 33 or 32. Austin Hooper has an expiring
Yeah,
contract.
he's out.
So like maybe he takes over the Hooper
Yeah.
role and we get back to the two tight end sets.
Do you think the Chargers are in play?
Oh,
I
for him to
think.
return there? Oh, no, not to return. I'm sorry. With Gadsden, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I think Gadsden's kind of like Fannin in the sense of we hit a home run in the draft. Let's not bury it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I like it. I like it. But yeah, I'm a non-fan. And Judkins, man, like I thought I look, I thought he did great. Like, but before the injury, he was playing really good football. He was a volume-based guy, obviously, but I think he's their future. I don't think it's Samson. I know that there was some Sansom fans out there, Dylan Sampson. For me, it's Judkins when he's healthy. It was an unfortunate, how his season ended, but 827 yards, 230 rush attempts. He had 26 receptions, 171 receiving yards, 7 rushing touchdowns. Considering how bad this team was, I think those numbers are pretty solid, like pretty impressive considering the state of this offense, right? You just look at the quarterback play for Cleveland all season long, and it was not great. Uh, you know, so for me, I think they were pretty good. But what are your thoughts on Judkins, and what they do with this backfield here? Jerome Ford set to be a free agent. So like what they do here with this backfield in 2026.
Yeah, I think Judkins was a good ad by this front office. 14 games played. He was the number 36 overall pick, finished just shy of 1,000 yards from scrimmage at 998. You mentioned the poor quarterback play. I will say it was horrendous. They were 32nd in EPA per dropback. Uh, the offensive line was also 31st in yards before contact, so they didn't really give Judkins a chance. So I like to look at a lot of advanced stats, and Judkins just did not shine in a lot of them. But I think a lot of that was really in terms of responsibility and onus. It should be placed along the OL rather than what Judkins was enabled to do. Because again, despite all these struggles that he had, like this guy was number one among all backs with 100 carries in highest rate of stuffed runs. Like that's a stat more reflective on the offensive line over everything else. So like an offensive line overhaul. Like don't forget this team just traded for a right tackle just earlier this past week. Getting help there, I think, is just super super important, and it's gonna eventually down the road help Judkins and this whole rushing attack. Um, Judkins did end the year with a fractured fibula and a dislocated ankle, a very gruesome injury there in week 16. But this past weekend, we just saw General Manager Andrew Berry say that he's out of his walking boot and he's on pace to be ready for training camp. So this is some good news. That's some good news for Judkins. Dylan Sampson, I think he's fine just as the RB2. I think they can let Jerome Ford walk with Sampson set up to be that guy as their number two guy. I really liked him as a pass catching threat.
Yeah.
So there were um, 65 running backs with 50 plus carries. And among those guys, when we look at the receiving profiles, Dylan Sampson was the RB2 in yards per out run, 2.01, right behind Bijan Robinson, 2.02, and with Bijan leading the way. So Sampson was super efficient as a pass catching back. So I like that 1-2 punch they've got there with everybody healthy. We just need that offensive line to get better.
Yeah, man. The offensive line was just a disaster last year. Like they were, you mentioned that they were 26th in rushing EPA per carry last year. I think a lot of that was because of the offensive line, right? Like it was just a bad unit. Um, and I think they're going to build there. I think that that's where they're going to start building here. And if they do that, I think this backfield is going to be just fine. If you could give these two, especially Judd, because if you give him a little bit of space, I think he's capable of, big plays without question here. We've talked about the offense. We talked about the offensive line. I think defensive wise, this is a pretty good unit. Cleveland has, for the last several years have had a pretty good defensive unit. I don't know if they're going to be addressing it as much as they're going to be addressing the offense here, but a cornerback I think would be the position that they could upgrade here. Any thoughts on that or any defensive side, anything on the defensive side that you have in mind?
Yeah, I think linebacker makes a lot of sense. Defensive line makes a lot of sense. Safety as well. Sure, you can throw in cornerback too. Martin Emerson, a free agent right now. Safety to me is the one that's most intriguing. Like we've got a new defensive coordinator coming over. His name is Mike Ruttenberg. He's coming from the Atlanta Falcons. He kind of followed what's his name? The Jeff Ulbrich from
Yeah.
the Jets to the Falcons. So he spent some time with New York Jets and with Atlanta. So I'd envision him to kind of mimic what we've seen the last year from Atlanta, which was a team that played a lot of single high coverage, top five in single high coverage rate. And because of that, they need a free safety. Like they got Grant Delpit, but we've got Ronnie Hickman slated to be a free agent. He had over 1,000 snaps played for this team last year. So if they don't bring him back, getting a free agent signing at free safety specifically, I think would be a super big get for this team. Linebacker, they've got Devin Bush set to leave. I think they need a guy next to Carson Schwarzenegger, the defensive rookie of the year, bringing in somebody like Quincy Williams. Talking about the Jets, bringing in like those ties. Maybe they got somebody that they're familiar with there. Um, the defensive coordinator Ruttenberg, he was the Jets linebackers coach from 2021 to 2024. So I like that pairing as a potential fit. And then, yeah, you mentioned corner. They'll probably be shifting toward a little more zone prior than the man heavy looks that Cleveland had been running under Jim Schwartz. So maybe getting a zone based corner would make a little sense there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that with Bush leaving, he had a big season last year. With him leaving, that's they're gonna need to fill that void without question. There. Anything else here with Cleveland that we didn't discuss, man?
No, just they don't have a lot of cap space, negative 8.7 million. So I think they're going to see a lot of their moves happen in the NFL draft, where they've got the number six pick and the number 24, thanks to that Travis Hunter trade.
And if they can unload some of those contracts that they have, right? Like Judy, like you mentioned, the trade. I don't see it happening. But if they can do something like that, still not going to be enough. I don't think they're going to be able to do too much in free agency. Like they're going to have to do trading or address a lot of these needs in the draft. So I agree with that here. I do think it's going to be a couple of years, before they're where they want to be. I don't think this is a quick turnaround because they still don't have the answer to the main question, and it's the quarterback position. That's just the truth here. So I think it could be a couple of years until they figure out. But for now, build within the trenches here in Cleveland. Jumping to the final team here in this division, the team that won the division, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, Mike Tomlin resigned. Mike McCarthy is the new head coach here. They also have a new offensive coordinator, Brian Angelichio. They brought him in now, so they're going to see a new look here with this Steelers offense. The big question is: does Aaron Rodgers return? Does he call it quits? Well, what happens here with Aaron Rodgers? We're not going to know right away. We're probably going to have to go on one of those getaways, those trips that he goes and hides in that black hole for like 4 days and comes out and then makes up his mind. So we'll wait around for that. Obviously, they have that's one of the biggest issues and free agent questions that they have here. But I think a team that has a very good defense. I think you have a good foundation. This has been a franchise that year in year out competing. So for me, I think it's minor changes here. But your thoughts from them from last season, Tyler, and then going into the 2026 season, what is the biggest question for the Pittsburgh Steelers here?
Yeah, Pittsburgh was a interesting offense where we saw Aaron Rodgers do his typical thing where he's just so frustrating to watch because the way he plays is it basically takes the clock all the way down to zero, and it just really kind of shortens the game in terms of total play volume. Um, they have a good mix of the run, a good mix of the short pass game, but it's all like dink and dunk small stuff and kind of them relying on efficiently moving the ball, eating up clock, and then relying on their defense on the other side to bring it home for them. I'm curious to see what we got here from Mike McCarthy and Brian Angelico here as the offensive coordinator. Um, Angelico worked with McCarthy back in Green Bay. Like McCarthy basically brought back a lot of Green Bay retreads. Same with his offensive line coach, James Campen, who was the Packers offensive line coach from 2007 to 2018. So I envision a lot of zone blocking with Campen. I envision the Steelers offense to lean more into the quick passing game and more of a spread offense. So I think that'll be a big difference from what we saw from the Arthur Smith ways. We could see less 12 and 13, more 11. Um, but man, I just hated watching Aaron Rodgers, and that's kind of where this conversation needs to begin. What the QB, all reports are kind of indicating that Rodgers has indicated he would like to return for another season in Pittsburgh. I'll just note last year, Rodgers was 36th of 36 in ADOT, average depth of throw, 6.2 yards. He was number one in time to throw. He basically was just trying not to get hit. He was just getting rid of the ball quickly and letting his receivers try to catch it in space. The problem was he wasn't accurate. He was really struggling in accuracy, QB 30 in completion rate over expectation among 36 qualifying. He had 3 games where he cleared 20 fantasy points. He was largely irrelevant, quarterback 24 in fantasy scoring. Fifth highest check down rate, the seventh lowest deep throw rate. So when you add in a guy like DK Metcalf, he was basically reduced to a yak player, which wasn't really his skill set. So I don't know what the plan is long term. I don't know if they've got the answer long term. We just saw Matthew Berry put out his combine article where he talks to a lot of coaches and front offices. And he noted in that article that the Pittsburgh front office wants Rodgers to return. But for whatever reason, if that fails to happen, they're content going to Will Howard, last year's round six pick out of Ohio State, as their guy over some of the free agents that they may have to overpay for. So I'm very interested in that. I think it's a good sign to go buy Will Howard cheap in dynasty formats. I know our guy Rich Mileto is all about Will Howard as well, so shout out to Rich. But yeah, that's kind of where I am with this passing attack. I think it's kind of open-ended as we enter 26. They've kind of got some short-term solutions, but I don't know if the long-term solution is there. But we've even got this quote from their general manager, Khan, where he says, "We're all searching for the next franchise quarterback for the next 10 or 15 years. It might be Will Howard. We don't know." So that's, I don't know, as optimistic as you can take it. Uh, I just know Will Howard won't cost you anything, and you can probably get him as a throw-in in a lot of deals right now.
Yeah, I don't think they're convinced it's Will Howard. I at least that's not a to me that's not stamping of approval there that's Will Howard there. Look, if Aaron Rodgers comes back for 1 year, sure, but like you said, to what game manage? That's really what he's gonna do here. So for me, I think that's still a big question mark there. I think a wide receiver to complement DK Metcalf is huge. Like he's a field stretcher. That's what he is, man. He's not someone that's going to be a possession receiver. Do you think that's a need here for this team here?
So like I'm trying to vision how this offense changes from like the 12-13 to more 11 and just more receivers on the field. So like we saw a lot of struggles with Rodgers connecting with his pass catchers, and I think a lot of that was because he was trying to throw to like tight ends. And no offense to Jonnu Smith and Darnell Washington, they aren't the most agile guys out there. Washington basically a sixth offensive lineman. But yeah, getting more of Roman Wilson out on the field, adding another player, whether it be in free agency or the NFL draft, I think would also be wise. Um, but just getting guys that can separate and uh, maybe try to build that early rapport with Rodgers, I think would be a lot more helpful than what we saw with the tight ends, where maybe I'm dunking on Rodgers a bit too hard given the circumstances. We've dunked on Arthur Smith offenses for a while. No surprise that another quarterback kind of struggled in his scheme.
Yeah, look, I think that's when you look at the downfield pass you mentioned, it was very nice. I think they were 30th, right, in that department. As far as the catch rate downfield, for the receivers here for Rodgers. So I definitely think that the deep ball was an issue, but I also think that it's because you said like they didn't really have anyone they could rely on there. They were really easy to defend. Like Pittsburgh was really easy to defend last year. And I just think you need some additional pieces here. Roman Wilson didn't pan out. Like it was just a bad season. Do you think that was more because of the system or because of the player?
So outside of DK Metcalf, the only wideout with more than 15 catches last year was Calvin Austin. So like their high rate of multi tight ends really just kind of limited anybody from ever seeing the field, ever getting that development. We saw some late throws, a late throw and a Hail Mary over for Adam Thielen. Didn't really work out. MVS kind of didn't really work out either. I don't know. I think a lot of it comes down to putting players in a position to succeed, and Wilson just never got that opportunity. Kind of like Michigan, he never really got that opportunity. So I still feel like he's a player in progress. I don't know if the breakout's imminent, but maybe if they do go and use him as their slot guy, maybe he does kind of see a bit more work here in 2026 than what we've seen these first 2 years.
This is a team that I think Romeo Dobbs will fit in.
I love
Um,
that. I love that.
like that's kind of like it's not the sexy edition. It's not oh my God. I think it's a good fit. I could see that. Um, that I could see that taking place here in Pittsburgh because I do think he would be a good complement to someone like a DK Metcalf, where he doesn't have to be the guy, he doesn't have to be the one, but he could be that underneath player that go to that moving the chains guy, all of that stuff, doing the dirty work. Romeo Dobbs
Yep.
could do the dirty work here in Pittsburgh. They're gonna Gainwell hitting free agent. That's a huge one. When you look at his backfield, because he had a significant role here. He actually, when you look at 28% of the team's rush attempts, 16% target share there for him. He had 109 opportunities, at 21% of the team's opportunities there. I think Gainwell is going to be an asset where he goes. I do think that they're going to they need to fill that void here, Tyler. What are your thoughts on this backfield with, Kenneth Gainwell looking on the way out here?
I loved this backfield. I thought it was a lot of fun to watch week in and week out. I'm actually going to start with Jalen Warren here because he's the kind of incumbent that took over after the Najee Harris departure. He went from the 1B to the 1A, as we saw Warren really operate as that lead driver of most of the rushing attack, with Gainwell operating more as the pass catching back. And both these guys, though, I mean, across the board, they were like top 20 in so many advanced stats: explosive run rate, missed tackles forced, yards after contact, rush yards over expectation. Warren was RB 19, Gainwell RB 20 in terms of fantasy points per game. So these guys were like a 1-2 punch that really thrived well. Gainwell, 1 year deal coming from Philly. Um, I've got quotes that the Steelers want to bring back Gainwell, but I would not be surprised if Gainwell after this season would like to go elsewhere where he could compete for a starting job after the season he just had, because he was great rushing, receiving, across the board. He just looked like a really adept running back. So I would not be shocked if he kind of prices himself outside of Pittsburgh. Maybe he offers the ability to match, but um, we all kind of like squinted and were like, why are we doing Warren and Gainwell? Like, what's the point here? They just spent a round 3 pick in Caleb Johnson. What's going on here? And it kind of worked. Warren and Gainwell, like collectively, this team was where is it? Seventh in EPA per rush, seventh in rush success rate. So I'd like to see them try to bring him back. I just don't know if it'll happen. They've got some good cap space though. 42 million, eighth most.
Yeah, he was super efficient, dude. I mean, super efficient. Big part of what they did on the ground and in the air too. Like we can't,
Hmm.
dismiss what he did in the air. There he had 85 targets. That's a big number there for him. Um, Caleb Johnson, that was a complete bust like last season. Like I I don't know. What do you think going like if you're holding him in Dynasty right now, what are you thinking? Like, how do you feel? I'll tell you this, I wouldn't be super confident right now. Um, but how do you feel?
Yeah, it's tough. I think he is, like you said, a Holden dynasty. Like you can't sell him. You spent too much to get any type of return back that merits selling him. And I don't know if buying him is worth it either because we've got a new coaching staff coming in here that doesn't have ties to him. So we're in wait and see mode. I think that's the easiest way to just describe it. Unfortunately, the year didn't go as planned. A lot of burnt round 9 picks by me over here, investing in
Same,
Caleb Johnson.
same.
Um, yeah, it's just we're in wait and see mode.
Valdez Scantling is said to be a free agent. That doesn't do anything. Austin said to be a free agent. That is something, obviously to keep an eye on. Outside of that, there is Scotty Miller, not a big loss there, in my opinion. Outside of that, it's mainly defensive guys. They have a couple of offensive linemen, but some defensive players here set to be free agents. When you look at the tight end position, though, before we dive into the offensive line and defense, when you look at the tight end position here, you mentioned it. Like I think we're going to see an entirely different look. I don't think you're going to see all of these tight ends on the field as often as they were last year. Um, do you see this becoming a difficult situation to navigate from a fantasy standpoint? Or is there one tight end here that stands above all in your eyes?
Yeah, the coaching staff is very high on Pat Freiermuth. They've got next 3 years, $11 million cap hit, 12 million, and then 10.5. They are very high on this guy, and I cannot echo that out enough of camp. I keep hearing it time and time again. Um, Darnell Washington is on pace to recover from, I think it was a broken arm, I believe. I'm not 100% sure on the injury, but he's on pace to be ready for training camp. Johnny Smith, 31 years old, $10.9 million cap hit. He would be the guy I'd anticipate being a cap casualty. It just seemed like he and Rodgers were never on the same page. Every missed throw, they'd both be looking at each other like with their hands up, like what's going on? I don't know if they were choice routes where Johnny got to pick which route he ran based on the coverage he dictated. That was dictated. I don't understand. But I would imagine Johnny's kind of out now that we've got the Arthur Smith era in the rearview mirror. Um, with that said, I think Freiermuth would be the guy I would target with Washington, unfortunately, playing more of that sixth offensive lineman and maybe more of a role in the red zone or short yardage kind of situations. You did mention just a little bit ago Calvin Austin and MVS both being free agents. I will note that the Steelers brought in a new wide receiver coach who comes from Buffalo. I'm kind of curious if we see like a Gabe Davis come over, who's a free agent, to kind of fill their role, the vacated role of MVS and Calvin Austin as the pure field stretching guy. I think he'd be a cheap guy, kind of like Gabe Davis has bounced around quite a lot
Yeah.
since his first couple of years in Buffalo. Seeing him come here wouldn't shock me at all. Yeah, to answer the tight end thing, I'm sticking with Freiermuth as the priority.
Let's keep in mind, Fryermuth has given us two top 10 seasons throughout his career. Like there is that kind of upside. Like he's one of those tight ends that you can probably get very cheap. And as long as the reports aren't there as often and it's not a consistent drumbeat, the same drumbeat over and over, I think you'll be all right to be able to get him at a cheap price. He might be a lane route flyer here to consider this year. It just depends on what they do at the quarterback position, right? Because I think if Howard's under center, you'd have to temper. Would you be tempering expectations at that point, or would you be or would it be the same for you as Aaron Rodgers?
Rodgers to me is just kind of keeping the offense in neutral. Like you're never gonna get like a explosive game out of the Steelers offense. Last year they were 25th in yards per game, total yards per game. That doesn't do anything for me. Like when you look at like play volume, total yardage, it's just on the low end with Rodgers. So I'm not saying a change to Will Howard would be a net negative. That could be a net positive, actually.
There's no way to go get Jameis Winston,
It'd be
huh?
fun. It'd be fun.
Anywhere he goes would be fine.
That's true.
Um, Offensive line here. Look, they could use some help here, but I don't think it's a massive need for this team. Um, I think defensive wise, when you look at their needs right now, you can make a case for cornerback, tackle. But outside of that, I think their defense is pretty much intact. Anything the offensive line or defense that you looked at, they should be going after here, whether free agency or the draft.
Yeah, left guard Isaac Seumalo is a free agent. He was PFF's number seven highest pass blocking guard last year. Right guard Mason McCormick is a Jag. I think he'd be better served as a backup or a swing interior offensive lineman. So I have interior offensive line as one of their bigger needs because that left guard position is would be lacking. We also have to keep in mind left tackle Broderick Jones underwent neck surgery this offseason. He's no lock to be ready for training camp. So I think adding a difference maker on the left side of the line, whether it be guard or tackle, would be wise. Probably guard would make sense. If not, because I think Sayamalu may price himself out where we could see a lot of teams bidding for him. He's 32. He's still playing some of his best ball right now. I think he could land a 3 year, 35, $40 million contract, no sweat. Um, yeah, I would expect him to be a highly sought after guard in a market where there aren't a ton of them. Uh, what else? Do we hit defense yet?
No, no, no. The Samalu is the one that you don't think
Okay.
they bring him back?
I would like to think so, but I was amazed he ever left Philadelphia in the first place.
Because I could see you. So you think so you're looking at about 12 million a year for him, kind of in that ballpark range, 12 to
I
4.
would I would envision.
Looking at the spot rack, the spot track, the spot track, it's like about 9 to 10 million. I think they can afford that if
Oh,
they
they're
bring him.
thinking 9 to 10 in market value.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, maybe I'm a bit too
No,
excited.
no, I no, no, but no, but he might warrant that, right? Like there is always that team that's willing to pay more than potentially market value. Because I was thinking if it's in that 10 million range, they could bring him back. Um, they have the space for it. Interested to see what they do because I he's the one that I think they prioritize here of any of these players. Defensive side, what are you thinking?
So I've got their first three needs as quarterback, interior offensive line, and wide receiver. So I think like fixing the offense is a big need for them across the board. And then safety and interior defensive line. I think those are the two other ones. Safety, we've got multiple safeties with expiring contracts, and the only incumbent, Sean Elliott, is coming off season-ending IR where he had a knee injury. So I think getting a safety is super, super important. They've got Miles Killebrew, Chuck Clark, Jabril Peppers, all set to be free agents. So getting some help there would be wise. And then along the defensive line, like just Cam Hayward's about to turn 37, nearing retirement. He's likely going to come in as like a role player, coming in on specific downs. Keep in mind that Steelers were bottom 10 in EPA per rush allowed defensively. So getting some guys up there, some guys in the trenches makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, to kind of echo what you said, I agree with the receiver. This is why we talked about adding guys like someone like a Romeo Dobbs, and I don't think it needs to be a big splash. I just think it's I think what they're lacking is a possession receiver, like someone that they can trust underneath. Like that is what they're lacking here. Rodgers has always had that kind of receiver with him. Um, I mean, look, Randall Cobb was one of those guys that he utilized a lot. Like, you need one of those receivers for Aaron Rodgers to complement a DK Metcalf and to complement whatever they do on the other side of DK Metcalf as far as outside receivers concerned. But um, and I
Yeah.
agree that the guard position. I was just under the impression that they bring Seal back. Like I think that might be their priority here from everyone that's set to
Yeah.
hit free agency. So interested to see how they handle that situation there. And as far as defense, you mentioned it, the tackle position. I think it's very important. Safety very important. Um, but the thing, a team with a good foundation here. I'm just interested to see the changes in the offense going into 2026. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a fun offense to watch. Obviously, depending on who's under center. Fun and Aaron Rodgers at this stage of his career. I don't know if that's they go in the same sentence, right? On the football field.
Yeah.
Anything else here with the Steelers? Anything we didn't discuss, Tyler?
They've got 5 picks in the top 100, so I expect them to retool a lot of their team. But this is also a team that's coming off a 10-win campaign, made the postseason. Aaron Rodgers is a twilight of his career. They kind of have to go after some win now pieces, like in addition to retooling. So Pittsburgh with a top 10 amount of cap space, they're another fun team in this division that's likely to shake things up quite a bit personnel wise.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun
Yeah.
off season for them for sure. Tyler, what before we get going on, you let everyone know, like always, what you got cooking and all that stuff. Everyone that heard you yesterday they already know, but just let them know. For those who didn't tune in yesterday, listen to
Sure.
that show and listen to Tyler again today.
Yeah, you guys can catch all my work over at fantasyguru.com. All my work is on posted on Twitter at Tyler Beaker, Buecher. Yeah, we're just doing the offseason stuff now. We're in the middle of free agency. We're in the middle of the NFL draft. We're starting to break out our rookie profiles. We're in the NFL franchise mode of the Fantasy Guru product, where we cover all this stuff between now and training camp. So get in there. We got a lot of good content on the way. Excited to dive into it, man. Free agency starts March 11th. We're doing some of these little sneak previews right now of things that we're going to expect to happen. But once the bullets start flying, that's when the fun and actual chaos begins. I cannot wait.
Yeah, man, I'm pumped. You and I were talking a little bit about that before we jumped on live here, and I'm looking forward to it. Like you mentioned, we got rookie profiles launching next week. The free agent tracker, like it is each and every year, will be up and live there at fantasyguru.com. So make sure you're checking that out. That's where you can find all of my work as well. You can find me on the Twitter machine at Armando_Marsal, as well as on Instagram threads and TikTok at Mind Marsal. Remember, if you're enjoying this, enjoying the podcast, the content, make sure you're following, rate, reviewing the podcast, wherever it is you're consuming it. You can also find this show on the YouTube channel at the Mind of Marsal channel there. So make sure you're checking that out. If you don't want to just hear us and you want to watch us, you can see some of the faces we make, some of the times we laugh, all that stuff, reactions to certain things. Make sure you're checking that out on YouTube. Tyler, always a blast chopping up football with you and talking sports with you, man. I appreciate your time. For the great Tyler Beaker, I am Armando Marsal. Hopefully, you enjoyed this week's journey through the mind of Marsal. Until next time.